Good morning and welcome to a reflection on Tuesday the 13th of April. Passage I'm looking at this morning is John chapter 20 verses 11 to 18. It's a continuation of the resurrection story on that first Easter morning. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," meaning teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Instead, go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that she had seen these things and what he had said to her. These resurrection passages are a central part of the story of our Christian faith. God with us. And like me, I'm sure you never tire of reading them or hearing them. It's easy to imagine the fantastic emotion and ultimate joy, eventually, of Easter morning. It's not so easy reflecting on them to find something new to say in such well-known verses. And tonight, preparing this reflection, after a while, I think I've thought of something new, something I'm sure I've heard before, and something which I'm not sure is new or not. So three things that came out of the passage when I was looking at it. The first is the not new, not sure, but there's something intriguing about these passages, in that Mary is the one in the earlier part of chapter 20 who finds the stone roll away. Mary goes to the disciples and tells them what she's found, and also tells them that she thinks that Jesus' body has been taken away. They run to the tomb, they enter, the disciples that is, two of them, and then leave. And they leave Mary behind. Mary's not mentioned as being present in the earlier passages with the disciples, but she must have been, because she's there crying when they leave. It was early morning and not a particularly safe place to be, near the tomb of a controversial convict. But something caused Mary to wait. She didn't return with the other disciples to where they were staying, as the earlier part of the passage told us they did. Did she want to be near the tomb? I'm not sure. Perhaps she wanted to be alone, to compose herself, as the passage tells us she was crying. She wasn't afraid, at any rate, to be alone. Alone in her thoughts. Alone, I've no doubt, talking to her God. So perhaps one message is this: when we face loss and despair, as Mary did, don't be afraid to take it alone to God in our prayers. The second thing I'm sure it isn't new, I remember hearing a talk about this passage and the significance, which I think is undoubtedly true, of the role of Mary here as a woman who's been questioned as in the group, and a woman in a culture where at the time didn't place the same value on the opinion or testimony for a woman as for a man. There wasn't that type of equality. The angels weren't present when the disciples looked in to the tomb. They came after, and God sent them at that time, moments later. And it's Mary who saw them. And of course, moments after that, Jesus. The first person God chose to reveal his resurrection to was to Mary, to a woman. Challenging a social norm of the time, she became the first witness to this world-changing event. She wasn't the obvious candidate for the role. Why not Peter or one of the other disciples, well known in the group? And so it tells us, I think, that God won't always make the choice that's obvious to the world. And it may be because of her being alone with God, by her stricken prayers, that she was the closest person to understanding at that time, emotionally closest to God, ready to hear. But whatever the reason was, God knew she was the perfect candidate, and he revealed himself to her. He revealed the resurrection to her. She told the disciples as the first witness, and she succeeded. And I think we can all be that person. In God's hands, we can all achieve more than we think we are capable of in his service. And finally, something new, at least to my thinking at any rate. When the disciples reach the tomb, they find it empty, and they assumed, it seems, that someone had taken Jesus' body away, and they gave up and they went home. They'd been told earlier in the passage that Mary had found the tomb empty, and we are told that they had not realised that Jesus had risen. They were unable to see the truth. They were influenced, I'm sure, by the fact that people didn't rise from the dead. Mary had told them that Jesus' body had been taken. They went and they saw the grave closed. They saw what they expected to see, not what Jesus had told them to expect. Not rising from the dead in 3 days as he told them. They were unable to see that at the time, because it wasn't what they expected. It wasn't what the world told them they would find. Even Mary, when she first spoke to Jesus, she saw him, but she didn't. She thought he was someone else. She was not expecting to see Jesus. She was expecting to see other people, perhaps the people who carried him away, guards, or in her case, eventually thinking he was the gardener. She was unable, even as the best candidate, she was unable to see God right there for a moment, even having seen the angels. God can do something incredible. God was doing something incredible, something unexpected, something impossible. And for a time, Mary saw what she expected to see. She saw someone else. Even for Mary and for us, it's not always easy to see God in the world. It's easy for us to see what we expect to find, what we expect the world to tell us we will find. And so perhaps there's a message there to keep our eyes open, that even these great central figures of the Bible, of our history, weren't able to see God at that time right in front of him. So much more that we might find it difficult to see him now in the world around us. So perhaps the final message is that we should always try to look at the world through God's eyes, not our own. to see value in people who are marginalised, to see hope in the hopeless, to look for his hand at work around us, and when we see it, to celebrate, as no doubt Mary celebrated when she got home and told the disciples that she had seen the risen Lord and that he was going to return to his God and to her God. So a prayer. Jesus, your resurrection changed everything. Help us to come to you when we despair, trusting that you can comfort us. Help us to trust your judgment in us, even when it's unexpected. Rising from death, you return to the world where you remain in your spirit. Help us to see you everywhere that you are and celebrate. Amen.